Aadya Shah is an individual with wide-ranging practical knowledge and a proclivity towards creative insight into the art of filmmaking. Besides being a freelance writer, she teaches editing and post-production at DICE Vancouver Film School, inviting a well-balanced approach to story writing and film editing. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Suave Critic Conversations. Today, I'm very enthused by this conversation idea that we are going to have. Welcome, Aadya ma'am, to this this recording. So, yeah, we'll be talking about how films, especially art films, how they break editing rules and how they interact with this entire storytelling device. So the films that we have under consideration that we have sort of picked out are In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai, Hiroshima Mon Amour by Alain René, Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan, Drive by Nicolas Winding Refn, and Columbus by Kogonada. Now, I feel that it's because of this idea that we'll go across genres are we doing this. But what is your thinking behind choosing this range of films?
So for me, all of these films have created an impact on me, not only in terms of editing, but just in terms of various aspects like scripting, cinematography, and different things like that. And particularly in terms of editing, they have very, very different styles.
Right.
So when I picked these films, I was looking at in terms of, I was also considering a few other films. But these were the ones that made the most lasting impression on me. And I think there are 3 or 4 of them out of the 5 which I go back to very regularly.
Hmm.
So, which are also like a film like Dunkirk or a film like Columbus. They are very much like forever loves for me in terms of films. So I just keep going back to them, and that's why I just thought, let me include these also.
Right. So I guess you thought that the editing and stuff, it makes the film rewatchable in its intrinsic value, right?
Definitely, because I think the way they sort of use conventions in editing and also break them, make them all the more compelling for me to keep going back to.
Hmm.
And also, as just products as a whole, I just find them just very thoroughly enjoyable to watch.
Right. So while I was during our preparation theorizing about the films, I came out with this claim that it's all these films lie in one spectrum of editing rules, wherein you have Dunkirk and you have Hiroshima Mon Amour on one extreme end where they are reinventing rules, and the rest on the other end where they are sort of creating this system of rules. But we'll probably through this conversation we'll actually realize what it is all about, like what these films, how these films lie in the grand scheme of editing. So yeah, let's take, I guess we'll take In the Mood for Love first. What are your thoughts on it?
So, In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai is a film which I have seen, I think, a couple of years ago. And I remember Mattered in CFC, which is a theater in Bombay, before, at least pre-pandemic, would screen different parallel cinema and art cinema movies
Ah.
every weekend. And I remember it screened In the Mood for Love more than once. Like at
Oh.
least it would become like a once a year thing, as at least from what I remember. So I remember with each watch, I was sort of I was noticing newer and newer things in terms of its costumes, in terms of its camera, and in terms of its editing. And what I found was it uses a very interesting approach of continuity editing, where any kind of dialogues that are there between our protagonists. Also, I just want to, just as an aside, just sort of synopsize the film in one line. It's
Yeah.
basically about the love story. It's basically a love story about a man and a woman, they both are married, not to each other, but to separate people, and they realize through the course of the film that their spouses are involved.
Hmm.
So they, through circumstances, they kind of embark on something of their own through the film, and it's set, I think, in the early 1960s in Hong Kong. So what I found was through coming back, what I found was through its continuity editing, it basically does something very interesting. There's one scene in a restaurant where they they haven't really caught on to the fact that their spouses are cheating on them with each other.
Hmm.
But it's a very interesting scene where the way they have taken certain angles, the conversation is very much framed as just almost like a ping pong match, a little
Uh-huh.
bit,
Right.
where you just have each of their faces framed.
Hmm.
And then I think in one of the I think a little later you kind of go and into an OTS, or an over the
Uh-huh.
shoulder shot. So those choices in editing are very interesting to me, where they have framed it not only in a certain way, but they've chosen to cut to a separate angle or to a separate shot altogether to maybe show
Uh-huh.
a change in conversation, or maybe to show just the reaction.
Right.
And what I also found, I think, in one of the conversations was also how when one of them is talking, you always they end up the editor focuses a lot on not just the other person's dialogue, but on the person who's not speaking, on their reaction. So I found that very powerful. So you don't
Hmm.
have to always you don't have to always make it like a ping pong match. You
Right,
can
right, right.
also focus on the person's reaction, and that's what I actually found very nice, and like a nice sort of thing to set the tone.
Right,
um
right, right. Yeah,
and yeah.
I found this interesting that, like, in the way also that you spoke of it, a ping pong match. While on paper, probably this film is a romantic film, it's in the editing that you sort of make it like a ping pong match, like make it like a confrontation, conflict. And I like this idea that it goes beyond this and sort of makes love almost like a currency of exchange between the
Hmm.
two characters. And what do you think? Like, uh, do you agree with that?
When you say currency of exchange, how do you, can you elaborate on that?
So, kind of like a interchange of, like, something that is external to them, right? When
Hmm.
we talk about love and we talk about most romantic movies and how they are mostly edited in this form wherein there is an empathy that is between the two
Hmm.
characters. But here it's more like, I am in service to you and you are in service to me. So I found that very interesting that they are placing the images of their respective partners onto the other person. And I think that is what
Yeah.
makes this more like a clinical ping pong match, or an interchange between exchange between these two characters.
Yeah, I like the fact, I like how you put it, where you said they're basically asking each other, or they are play acting,
Hmm.
and they are basically it's like their way of figuring out how that affair must have begun. So she slips into his wife's shoes, and he slips into her husband's shoes,
Right.
and through that play acting, it's very interesting, because as a viewer, it's like you kind of sort of wonder, oh, are they play acting because maybe they're into each other a little bit, or maybe they are just trying to figure out what they might have sort of seen in each other, her
Hmm.
husband and his wife. So there's so much actually left to the audience to infer. And I think
Right.
the editing also plays a role in that, where it's suggesting things. It's not really also dialogue obviously has a role in this, along with the actors performances, but even
Yeah.
editing, it's just suggesting things. It's very much leaving it up to the audience to sort of figure out what's really going on.
Right. Perhaps it's establishing an irony of sorts. Uh,
Hmm. That's there.
Right. And so, yeah, what do you think? Like, do you think the entire structure of this film is like very traditional? And like what I inferred from what you have spoken of this film is that the structure is traditional, but it picks out these movements to break the traditional structure. Am I right?
Yeah, where it is very much traditional in terms of, yes, like it is in terms of its dialogue, it's also fairly, it's using those same principles to edit dialogue that
Hmm.
pretty much everyone would use. But I think it's breaking certain conventions, especially with, I think, respect to um, editing certain scenes. Like I've seen, there were certain scenes that I realized were just one shot
Hmm. Okay.
and they don't go into any kind of coverage. So by coverage, I mean not just sticking to a wide shot, but just going into a close up or like an OTS. So there were certain scenes
Hmm.
like that which I found were left like that, very much either in a wide or in a mid, and they
Aha.
were not like, they were just left like that, and beyond that, they just moved on to the scene after that. So I really like this approach of less is more. Like
Aha.
it's very clearly edited. It's a very smooth kind of edit.
Right.
Um, One other thing I noticed, which kind of broke the kind of pace that the film had established till that point, was where I think he asks her to he wants to work on these martial art comics, and that is their way of kind of spending time together. But he said, he at one point he says something like, I want to move out so that we can just write them together,
Hmm.
and I don't want the neighbors prying in on us, and I don't want gossip. So
Hmm.
I think she visits that room, and what is very apparent is, you can see, it's nowhere established through dialogue, but you can see how she's very anxious at the thought of that when she's driving to go there.
Hmm.
And in a very it's there's a portion where she's climbing up and down the stairs, maybe searching for where he stays, or maybe she's unsure if she really wants to go or not. She's thinking twice about it, where the editing becomes very disoriented. Like
Aha.
it's a series of fairly fast cuts, not in not really establishing much continuity.
Aha.
And I just felt that just broke that entire whatever it had in terms of its its tone, in terms of editing, and its sort of pace. And I found that very interesting, because that jarred kind of editing does not appear again in the film. So
Hmm.
maybe it's showing her frame of mind through those cuts. I just found that super interesting, and I think that's a very interesting example of breaking a certain convention that it had also set prior to that scene, as well as
Right.
breaking certain continuity rules or whatever else.
A little bit of a digression, but once you said that, I remember something that I'd read about this film or heard, I guess, somewhere that it also speaks about the identity of Hong Kong, wherein you have
Hmm.
this overarching autocratic rule, but then there's also this breaking of those rules when Western bent of mind comes in, which is interesting because they also say that their respective partners, are in foreign countries somewhere traveling. So, yeah, but very interesting. You said that you describe this film as less is more. We have another film that has this a similar approach, which is Columbus by Kogonada. So, what are your opening thoughts on it?
So Columbus is the feature film debut of Kogonada, who is, I think he's a Korean American filmmaker, if I'm not wrong.
Mhm.
So he basically, he used to work on video essays, and he's done, like, I mean, a lot of my favorite video essays have actually come from him.
Wow.
So I was very familiar with his edit work there. And when I saw Columbus, I actually found it very interesting that an American indie film is so influenced by Yasujiro Ozu, who's this
Uh-huh.
Japanese filmmaker. So I just found it very interesting because the few indie films I've seen from America do not necessarily, um, follow the same principles he does. So I just found it very refreshing, and I found it very interesting how the film is. It's dealing with architecture, it's dealing with space, it's dealing with so many of these abstract and interesting ideas. It's also dealing with um, family, in terms of family politics a little bit, and it's dealing it with I think the female character, it's also like a coming of age story for her in a way. So it's not it has a lot of themes that are going on. It has a lot of um, content that you can sort of unpack after you watch it, and it remains an absolute favorite of mine, primarily because of this less is more approach that it takes,
Mm-hmm.
where it just basically follows the meeting of two individuals. One is um, basically this guy played by John Cho, who is the son of a very famous architect, and his father collapses and he's in the hospital. His son has to visit him, and he encounters this young girl called Casey, who is a tour guide in the town of Columbus, and she's
Right.
dealing with her own stuff at home. And you kind of follow the interactions through, the space, the public spaces in Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in terms of its edit, it's very much, how do I put it? It's, again, it doesn't cut a whole lot within scenes. It has this approach of like, this is just enough. So I think anyone who's sort of seen the film will also be able to sort of um, I guess, agree with the fact that there are certain scenes which actually just are just two or three shots and that's it. You don't need more than that, and that is what I love. I love the economy in its editing, and I'm guessing in the economy of its shooting.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how true this is because I have not corresponded with anyone worked on the film, but I'm just making a guess here that
Mm.
it could be he also might be shooting that way. He might be shooting um and he might be very sure of how much he wants to shoot. Kogonada. That's why you see this similar approach in editing. Um,
Uh-huh.
there's one scene in particular which really actually struck me, which was a very nice scene about, which features these two characters, John Cho's character and Lou Richardson's character called Casey. So
Right.
they're standing in front of an architectural marvel, which is it's a glass cover, it's a glass bank, and she's basically just giving him a background
Hmm.
of the building, and he's like, "Do you like this building because of its facts, or do you like the building because it moves you?" And she says it's because it moves her. So then he's like, "Yes, tell me more about that. Tell me more of why it moves you." And the entire exchange is, at least up till that point, is in two shots. One is a wide shot with just the
Hmm.
both of them in the distance, and the other shot is where Casey's character is her reflection is shot in the glass.
Uh-huh.
So it's a very interesting thing, and then you cut back to the wide shot, and when she starts talking about why the building moves her, you cut to a shot of her. I guess it's taken from inside the building
Yeah. Yeah.
where it's just her and she's speaking, but you can't hear what she's saying because there's a very interesting piece of I don't know if the genre is post rock, but it's very sort of very minimal. It's very, very interesting and it's a little haunting. So you
Hmm.
sort of see this piece of music over this visual, and you kind of get a sense of, oh, you don't necessarily need to know why. Everything is written on her face in terms of the emotion, in terms of the way she's speaking the building. So it's also a moment of emotion and vulnerability between the both of them.
Hmm.
And it also is a nice start to their friendship through the
Uh-huh.
course of the film. So this one scene is just beautifully done, where
Right.
you just need those shots. You don't need anything more. You don't necessarily need to see John Cho that much, because the scene is about her.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it was a very long answer, but yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, so like what I inferred was from your approaches, you understood some kind of discipline in the editing. And then
Yeah.
there was this one magical moment that just uh, went outside that discipline
Hmm.
in a certain way. But very interesting description, haunting. So, what do you think was uh, the mood? Like, why was the mood a haunting mood? Like, I guess it is connected to vulnerability, probably. But why do you think uh, it was haunting?
I think it's primarily because up till that point, it was fairly like again, like just exchanges between the characters.
Hmm.
But I just sort of, it was interesting with that piece of score
Hmm.
that was there for the film. I just found that making it even more richer.
Hmm.
So for
Okay.
me, that was, I think, what played a role in the haunting effect of, I think, that scene.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know I've forgotten the name of the band. Hammock. It's the band's name is Hammock. Beautiful music, and I think it's like a very fitting choice um, to score the film with their pieces. Yeah.
Right. I guess I'll just close my eyes and listen to this track again. But so, yeah, moving on to the next film. This is from my favorite, personally, my favorite director, Nicholas Winding Refn,
Hmm.
Drive. So, what do you think of Drive? Like, where do you think it stands in terms of breaking rules?
So Drive is again a fairly conventionally edited film.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of power in even in a conventional edit like Drive, because Drive is also the story of a young man who essentially moonlights as a getaway driver. So he's, let's say, a stunt driver during the day and a
Hmm.
car mechanic, but at night he works as a getaway driver for robberies and sort of, for that side of things. And it's basically his sort of journey that we're following in the film. And I found that the edits, very specifically in those car chases and robberies, um, were very, very well done, because they created a sort of um, they created a or they built up a lot of tension.
Hmm.
Um, like the opening, I think the opening sequence
Right.
primarily sort of introduces us to his character, but it's also introduced in a way where it's primarily through what he does and how he does it, which is he's just helping these robbers escape after after they do their thing. And it's actually through that car chase that you get a sense of the fact that there are various points where the police is after him, and you can
Uh-huh.
clearly sort of see that. So the edit definitely builds up a sense of suspense.
Right.
And I think there was a very specific moment where the edit very slightly changes
Hmm.
throughout that portion. I mean, till that point, you're seeing also changes in the music.
Hmm.
um, it has like a very interesting kind of rhythm, the music before, right from the beginning, and it sort of has several modulations. But there is a point where there's a cop car just in front of him at a
Hmm.
signal,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and you know that like things are going to go down if he gets caught, and you don't want him to get caught. So that's actually a point where the music goes away completely.
Uh-huh.
And as he speeds up and you automatically see the cop car sort of trying to chase him, the music goes away. The edit also, it paces up a little bit. There
Uh-huh.
are
Yeah.
one or two shots, I think, almost from the perspective of the car. I think at the, um, I don't know what, I don't know, like right from the front of the car, I'm guessing the
Uh-huh.
camera would have
Yeah,
been
yeah,
there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that was also very interesting to put that into the mix. So
Uh-huh.
I felt that there was a very interesting sense of, build up in terms of tension and pace.
Hmm.
And I think things become very gradually slow down when he takes the car into this underground parking lot,
Hmm.
and he just leaves it there and he abandons it. He walks out among a crowd of, I'm guessing there was a sports event happening.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of crowd there, and he just disperses and he automatically becomes invisible. So I like how the pace automatically evens out after
Hmm.
that. So, and the upping and downing in the pace is very interesting for me.
Right, right. Yeah, from the same scene, something that really stood out to me was, I don't know, I mean, every car scene of him driving, I'm guessing that the cinematographer took every angle, and then it was the editor choosing which angle to take. But there's this one angle, the side view of the driver, from
Hmm.
the side seat, and you have, when the tension builds up, when it comes to the max, the there's a sort of emphasis on that shot, like it stays on for a long time. And I found that once the film progresses to other car scenes, it's not that, that's not the case. I don't know, I just felt that at that point of time it was his moment of asserting his
Hmm.
clinical strength, which once the narrative becomes emotional, once he becomes sort of emotionally influenced by forces and people around him, you have the person, the kid and the girl that he really likes, that is when the sort of editing goes a little more uh, close up to him than the car,
Hmm.
and the idea that he is driving the car. So I found that quite inspiring, I would say. Uh,
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, because you also see how the focus, I think, shifts as his focus shifts.
hmm.
Like it's something that's suddenly important to him as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like I appreciate the fact that this film is called Drive, but even in the like the technical elements of the storytelling, when he drives, it's at that point of time that you, in fact, I'll probably do this. I mean, it would be a great thing to observe. What if we just put the driving scenes one after the other and then just watch it? Probably it tells the entire story. Uh, so yeah, and of course it inferred a character arc, like a crazy character arc, I'd say. So yeah, I found that very
It's very
interesting.
it's that's a very interesting thing. It's a great exercise, I feel, to do, where you just take the driving scenes and you take them together. And I think what also would be an interesting thing that can be inferred from that exercise is also how you're seeing his mood
Hmm.
constantly. Like when I think there's a portion where he's driving with Carrie Mulligan, who plays the woman he's interested in, and her
Uh-huh.
son, and he takes them for a drive. So automatically he's pretty chilled out and happy. Like you find him pretty, you know, just sort of content and
Uh-huh.
settled. But I remember, I think only right at the end when he's driving, and I think is he leaving LA? Is that
Yeah,
what it
yeah,
is?
yeah. He's just going away,
So,
wandering off.
so it's just written on his face. He doesn't, it's just him, Ryan Gosling, like
Yeah.
his genius way of emoting, where he's just like sad
Hmm.
and very not content. Like it's a sharp contrast to how he was with Carrie Mulligan and her kid.
Uh-huh.
So, I feel like it's a great way of getting into his mind. And it's
Right.
a great exercise, I feel, to do eventually.
Uh-huh. But yeah, as we all know, this film is popular for other scenes. The elevator
Huh.
scene, for example. What do you
Yeah,
think is special there? I mean, compared to other filmmakers.
I think it's interesting how he used slow motion there.
Right.
And at the same time, that entire, I don't think there's any slow motion, right? In the rest of the film.
I think there's a couple of other shots which have become very popular GIFs, but the one in which he's carrying the kid and the camera is at the back, that's, I guess, I think that's another slow mo.
That is a slow motion, yeah. So I
There's a
feel like
couple of more.
the way they, I think I'm just guessing through the elevator scene, and I think when he's carrying the kid on his back, it's also like these are like moments I feel for him where time has slowed down for him.
Uh-huh.
Like he's very present, and it's also, I'm guessing, for him, moments which he doesn't get very often.
Hmm.
So if I'm just taking these two as an example over the other slow motion moments, so I just feel it was an interesting way of showing that, and for
Uh-huh.
showing time literally stopping, and to show or time slowing down, and yeah.
Right, right, right.
So I haven't seen. I mean, at the moment, I can't really recall filmmakers who've also done this,
Uh-huh.
but I find this very interesting in this film.
Right, right, right. You have, I guess, you have this guy. Oh man. Uh, the guy behind Tarkovsky, Andrei Tarkovsky, using it.
Huh.
But those are, I think, those are his personal shots that are slow mode rather than the characters. So
Hmm.
yeah, right. So yeah, moving on to the next film, we have Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan. Now, this is a radically different genre to deal with. But at the same time, I feel that it's one film that completely does away with any form of structure, in my opinion. But what do you think?
So I feel Christopher Nolan has arrived at a structure
Hmm.
within the film, because I also feel he's written the film keeping in mind the edit.
Hmm.
So the structure basically is that you're seeing a very significant event in World War II taking place from three perspectives,
Hmm.
and in a completely non-linear way. And of course, they will converge at a particular point.
Uh-huh.
So, in terms of the editing, again will follow that structure as per the story, where you have, I think the mole is one portion out of the three tracks. Then you have air, and then you have water.
Right, right, right.
So I think what was very interesting was the points at which they switch, where you're
Hmm.
going from the mole, and especially in the beginning, where you're still introducing all these elements.
Hmm.
So you go from the mole, then I think you go to the air, you go to the water, and then um, you kind of, that's also, I think, where I mean, a lot of the action actually begins in the air first, then it goes to the mole, then a lot of the drama surrounding people on the boat in the water comes much later. So the drama is all paced at different points.
Hmm.
At least the most, when I say drama, I mean the most dramatic elements, where either they are um, carrying the stretcher to get onto the boat,
Hmm.
or they are being they are attacking an enemy plane, or even whether I think they find Cillian Murphy's character um, as an abandoned sailor,
Hmm.
and they
Yeah.
sort of take him on their boat. So
Yeah.
it's sort of the ups and downs of all of the drama are paced in a very interesting way, and I feel the edit also very much contributes to that structure.
Hmm.
What I've also noticed Nolan doing is a lot of intercuts.
Uh-huh.
He's also now famous for that. There's also, I'm sure you've seen the video essay on it. So
Which one?
I think it's called, I don't know the exact title, but it has intercutting. I think the Nolan intercut or the
Hmm.
Nolan something it's called.
So,
I'll send you
yeah,
the link. I'll
I'll
send
put
you
it
the
up
link.
as a reference. We'll, yeah. ठीक है.
Cool. So he's done intercutting, I think in Prestige, I think in the one with the Joker's Dark Knight Returns, or is that Dark Knight?
Dark Knight Rises, I think.
Huh.
No, Dark Knight.
Oh
Dark
no,
Knight.
Dark Knight, Dark Knight. Yes, I keep forgetting Dark Knight Rises is Bane. But
Bane,
yeah,
yeah.
I think he's very good with creating tension and building up suspense just through like cutting from one narrative to the other one to the other one, then back. Then he does that very well. So it's working in a similar way here, where he's
Hmm.
figured out that this is something that will definitely get the viewer completely immersed in the story,
Hmm.
and seeing how it's a story about war and actually just a story about survival
Uh-huh.
more than actually, because no one here wants to win.
Right.
Everyone's just trying to survive.
Right.
So it's very sort of interesting to see how time also, and the way things are cut, it all works very well here. Um,
Hmm.
Also, with respect to, I think, the structure, it converges very beautifully, where it's not necessarily three timelines which are all happening at the same time
Linearly,
in the
yeah.
same. Yeah, so they're not happening in terms of this, they're not all happening at the same time of the day, but they're all happening at different points.
Hmm.
So to see it all converge beautifully in the end with this massive, very very dramatic scene, was brilliant, because I think you're very very invested by that point, and
Uh-huh.
you want to make sure everyone gets through this thing and everyone survives. And I want to also speak about the very last portion of the film. I
Hmm.
just also wanted to know, like, how are you in terms of spoilers? Like, can I give anything away?
Definitely, there's no issue. I
uh,
hope there's no issue with the audience. But ठीक है.
you
Of
can
course,
always, I
I'll
guess,
give
put a.
timestamps, and I'll probably put a chapter of spoiler area, whatever. So yeah, ठीक है.
Okay.
I'll figure around that. Yeah.
So, with the final portion of the film, you see pretty much everyone makes it through.
Hmm.
Everyone who is important, or the main protagonists out of all three tracks, they all survive.
Hmm.
What is very interesting is how the tone changes. So, you've gone from an atmosphere of high anxiety, a
Yeah.
lot of tension, like being on the edge of your seat, and you've gone into like kind of a relief,
Hmm.
and like it's a kind of, so the tone becomes automatically happier a little more, at least than before.
Hmm.
That has a lot to do with again sort of showing all three tracks and the way they come to the resolutions,
Uh-huh.
and also the music and the beauty. There's a beautiful voiceover of Tommy, one of the leads, played by Fionn Whitehead, who reads out Churchill's speech,
Right. Yeah.
and it gives you it kind of sums up the movie very well, and it's a perfect sort of ending to, or like it's almost like a sigh of relief, like you're
Hmm.
holding your breath the whole film, and then it's
Yeah.
suddenly you're just breathing out, and it's everything is calm and much more relaxed. So I feel
Right.
that the change in tone was very interesting to see,
Hmm.
even in terms of everything, the music, the edit, everything. um, Also in terms of just the way the action is covered,
Hmm.
in terms of editing, there is also an approach of, even if, let's say, Nolan has taken multiple angles, suppose, I don't know how he shot the film,
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know what went on in production, but um, they have arrived at an edit which is everything is in its place. It's just enough.
Hmm.
Or anything over than that, even a shot that lingers a few more seconds longer is like, do we really need this? At least that would be the first thought that crosses my mind. Like, why is this here? Do we need it? So whatever the final edit that they have arrived at is, everything is absolutely, it's tight. You can't
Hmm.
cut any more of it.
Yeah.
You can't make it a shorter film, nor should you make it unnecessarily longer if it's not going to affect the plot or anything in any way. So it's like a very tightly packed film, and I love it for that.
Right. What you said initially, like in terms of time and all, and how it's at different points of the day. Personally, I've not experienced a war film. It poses itself as a historical biopic of sorts, war film. But at the same time, I've never seen a film do that. But I think what can be inferred, like from all of these discussions, is that I guess the structure is more thematic. And I liked how like Nolan has pulled off this idea of collective sacrifice, because what I saw was that from one scene or one cut to the other, you had one guy suffering at one point of the war to another guy suffering at another point of the war at another place. Ultimately, I feel, and I guess cinema is the only way to do this, but you see at a rate the entire war and what kind of different kinds of tolls and tensions it can conjure up. It's so rich a theme to explore. And when you edit it one after the other, I guess that's where the magic lies. In fact, like one interesting similarity I found in Drive and this film was that you had this guy pilot, and this is the only place in the entire film, no, not the only place, but this is the one singular place where the singular element of the mise-en-scène, the clock, the watch, I mean, it starts ticking very sharply
Hmm.
and blends into the music. And I saw that even in those 5 minutes in Drive. uh, but yeah, I found that,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah,
And then,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
like, yeah, what I loved was that at first Hans Zimmer, like, it was disjointed from Hans Zimmer's music, right, in the film. It was only when the pilot was inside his uh, plane, and at that point of time you used to hear this clock ticking. But then towards the end, when everything sort of converges together, you have Hans Zimmer adding in clock ticks to his background music, which is what
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
I loved that. I mean, that's genius, I guess. But yeah.
yeah. That they've made very good use of the element of the clock ticking to
Hmm.
signify that urgency.
Right.
And it's not even just like you've mentioned specifically the clock here. I
Hmm.
think in the portion of the film where they are trying to get on board to the ship with the stretcher,
Uh-huh.
like that is again not, I mean, there's no clock sound there, but it's
Yeah.
borrowing from that same idea of
Ah.
like repeated notes
So it's more
and in
abstract, but then
succession.
it sort of becomes more
Yeah,
realistic as we go forward. I mean, more
yeah.
practical to the environment, I guess. Right. So yeah, now we come to our most uh like the most abstract and not so understandable, but still a beautiful film, Hiroshima Mon Amour by Alain Rene. So yeah, what are your opening thoughts on that film?
So I had seen that film actually pretty much exactly 10 years ago.
Oh.
And it made such an impression on me because I hadn't seen anything like it.
Hmm.
I had been exposed to a little bit of French New Wave, but at that point it was just 400 blows.
Uh-huh.
And this was another sort of thing altogether.
Another tangent, yeah.
And yeah, it was very, very different. And I remember like, I remember the entire narrative and the narration and the shots and the editing staying with me also after I had finished watching the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's also not really a very easy watch because it's dealing with war, it's dealing with memory, it's also dealing with also edited in a very interesting way, which I feel mimics memory.
Hmm.
Like I can just give you an example of again the opening in Hiroshima Mon Amour, where um, it's basically a character who is in Japan at the moment, and she embarks on an affair with a man.
Hmm.
And there's constantly a dialogue between them regarding Hiroshima, regarding the war. And you get a tiny glimpse of her past as well, and how war very particularly has affected her as well.
Right.
So in those portions, you will have her voiceover, and again it feels very stream of consciousness a little bit, but at the same time you have many images in rapid succession.
Hmm.
So you had, I think, portions of I think a museum, and looking at war torn bodies in the museum as well. So
Yeah.
it feels like you're a little bit in her mind seeing these images with her,
Hmm.
rather than her just sort of talking about it with over expositionary dialogue.
Hmm.
So I find it very interesting to an interesting device where you're breaking these conventional rules of editing by actually, you know, putting her voiceover in, putting these very disoriented and, a rapid succession of images
Hmm.
to sort of tell her story and to, get into her mind.
Hmm.
And
Right.
I just found that very, very interesting and exciting to watch. And even I think in terms of the rest of the film, um, there's a lot of suggestion of things, which I think it's similar to In the Mood for Love that way, where
Uh-huh.
it's suggesting a lot of things without necessarily saying this is it.
Hmm.
So I found that also a very interesting way of making a film.
Right. Yeah. Like I also found the irony in the film very sharp, where you have these intimate bodies connecting, but parallelly running with like atrocious crimes done to the Japanese, war crimes.
Hmm.
Right. So yeah, and how they interconnect and play through the rest of the film. It always constructs this enigma and it carries forward in the editing.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I really had fun in this conversation. Any closing comments you have uh, with respect to our observations?
So I'm super like this has been a great conversation for me too. I'm just super excited to be here and talk to you and geek out over films I've loved,
Likewise.
and also hear your perspective on these films also, because I think you had some very cool points and very interesting points to say.
Thank you.
As for closing remarks, I can't really think of anything. I don't really know. I think I've spoken a lot about the films in any case. So I think I'm good. Unless you have
Right.
something you want to say, I'm happy
No,
to
I guess now
continue
like we
also.
can segue into our set of questions that I ask everyone I have this conversation with. So, ma'am, are you ready for it?
Yeah, bring it on. Always ready.
Awesome. Cool. So, the first question is can you tell us about a film that you watched when you were a child and upon rewatching as a critic or a filmmaker, your viewing dramatically changed?
So I'll give you two examples. One was I had watched The Prestige by
Hmm.
Christopher Nolan again when I was 13. And I remember loving it primarily also because of the edit. But I at that point I didn't completely get a nuanced perspective of it. And when I rewatched it recently, there's a lot more that I've been able to unpack
Hmm.
from it, not just in terms of editing, but also in terms of the way it's written, and even in terms of tiny subtle things in the actors' performances. So I feel that those years have, I mean, that gap between seeing it then and seeing it now, I feel has definitely informed me a whole lot more about the filmmaking process
Uh-huh.
and about how movies are written, how shows are written, and different things like that. And also coming from a practical perspective of me also practicing writing and practicing screenwriting and different things like that, it also, I feel that has also lent itself a lot
Hmm.
to me sort of getting a better and better understanding of the film. And I
Right.
feel even like in 3-4 years again, when I revisit the film, I think I'll be able to also unpack a whole lot more then as well.
Do you think that Nolan's films are more for filmmakers, other filmmakers, as in people who are informed about the process? Or do you think that, I don't know, this of course is an oversimplification to all his films, but probably when we just look at the prestige, do you think that it is more catered to or just appeals more to people who know about the process?
I don't know, because I mean, whoever I've spoken to
Hmm.
has not really mentioned the prestige.
Uh-huh.
So they've mentioned a whole lot of different kinds of other films, but
Right.
and this is just my personal, it's just from my experience, and I'm not really found anyone who has specifically gravitated to the prestige because they themselves are film practitioners in any way.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But I don't know if it's a similar scenario all over the world or if it's just in my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely find that film practitioners can definitely derive a lot of excitement and just nerdy obsession with watching this film again and again, because
Uh-huh.
there's a lot that you can sort of examine and take apart with the film.
Right. Right. Cool. So the second question is, if you're in a room with someone who doesn't know or watch cinema at all, and you want to tell them why cinema is an important part, what would you tell them?
Huh. So I think I also want to reference my answer with what I said about prestige,
Hmm.
where it's a lot. Watching films primarily is a you can always take back a lot with you after watching it. Um, there's a lot to examine, discuss, dissect, and those are the funnest bits for me personally. Um, Even in terms of just watching the film, it's very interesting to um, be taken for a very be taken for a ride, but in the best way possible,
Hmm.
where you're made to experience a gamut of emotions. You also, um, it's kind of like you're walking away with an experience. And if you watch a film which absolutely introduces you to something new, like a new form of filmmaking or a new way of writing or editing or shooting, or even just a film which makes you really happy, then it's just something you can also keep going back to.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the most pleasant thing, and it definitely changes you a little bit.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, the films which I go back to again and again have also changed me a little in some way.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, in fact, I also can recall my early days of like going into films from Arthouse cinema where I used to just watch the film, have no idea on earth about it. But after thinking for 4 to 5 days or probably reading up on it or listening about it, it used to like just like my head used to explode out of like different approaches to, and it used to be a life changing experience, right? And I guess that's the power, that's where uh, a film viewing experience transcends just the regular idea of watching a normal film. So yeah, and the third question I wanted to ask is, in the history of Indian parallel cinema, if you have a chance to go back in the past, Indian parallel cinema or world art cinema, and view a premiere of a movie again, which one would you choose?
Mm, so I think this is Siddheshwari by Manikal, because I had seen the film a long time ago and I absolutely loved it. So I think it would be fun to sort of watch it at its premiere, and I think it will be a very, very fun experience. And I also want to mention one which is not within the Indian parallel cinema movement. And I don't necessarily want to just attend the premiere. I would love like a private audience with the director itself.
Of course. Yeah. Right.
For Through the Olive Trees by Abbas Kiarostami. I think that's my
Ah,
one of my absolute favorites. He like I mean I think I've watched pretty much all his movies, but this one is a particular favorite of mine.
hmm. Nice. Right.
I never like I want to know your answer for this also.
Oh man. I've never thought about this question, but uh, perhaps, yeah. I mean, I think one of the films that I'd love to watch because of the sole idea that it's so environmental and atmospheric. I would love to watch it in a theater if I ever got the chance, which is Amit Datta's The Seventh Walk. I felt
Hmm.
that it is just, I think it's a tough choice between Nensuk and The Seventh Walk, to be frank. But since Nensuk is about this artist journey, I'm fine with watching it on a TV screen. But The Seventh Walk is about this entire nature and how it relates to artistry and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would. But thank you for asking me the question. You alternately put me in a dichotomous situation too.
That's fine. No, I feel that's the best position to be in when it comes
Yeah,
to like
the
picking
most
something like this.
honest answers come out like that, maybe.
Because it's like I can also understand if you are not in a dichotomous position
Hmm.
also, where I mean maybe then it's easier for you to choose, or maybe you automatically have that film in mind where you're like, yes,
Ah.
this is the thing for me that I want to explore further into, or maybe meet the filmmaker. But if you can't choose between several movies, it's a great position also to be in, so it's fine.
Right, right, right. Thank you very much, ma'am. It was really fun. Uh, I guess this is the first time like we are because we have been on in online classes and stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah, first time we are having like this conversation catered to something specific. But yeah, it
this
was
was a
a
lot
lot
of
of
fun.
fun.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for
Jinx.
sure, for sure.
Right.
Oh shit, oh yeah, oh damn, oh damn.
I called
Okay.
it. I called it.
Okay.
ठीक है. Thank you, ma'am.
Cool,
So
thanks.